There's a lot of taboo, a lot of fear, even growing up watching movies, anything that had to do with the in between, with the intuition, it was like marked as scary or something that we should be afraid of. I was definitely not taught any of this stuff. One thing we can do to analyze, is this really, am I making this judgment around maybe even spirituality, for example, from a place of fear? Or is this truly my intuition speaking to me?
Our intuition is also there to help us, to also protect us. You're always going to encounter people that they show you one face and then they're a completely different person. Am I also seeing some signs that I realize, like, I don't like this. I can smell the bullshit from miles away. No se siente bien en mi cuerpo. Simplemente,
Yeah.
I don't want to be involved with this person, and that's okay. That is also your intuition. Not everyone's gonna be for you, and you're not gonna be for everyone. No eres monedita de oro para caerle bien a todos, you know. Bienvenidos todas, todes a otro episodio más aquí de Heal and Manifest podcast. I am your host, Cynthia Flores, and I am so excited for this podcast episode. I have a very special guest. Her name is Kris Cazare-Neri, and I will introduce her in a little bit of what she does. But the topic of today's episode is trusting your intuition. So it's learning how to trust your intuition, learning how to tap to your intuition. And we're going to talk a little bit of some of the challenges that do come up when it comes to how do we know if it's intuition? How do we know if it's coming from a place of fear or even trauma triggers? And also finding ways to reconnect to your intuition. So thank you so much that you're here. I hope that you like, follow, subscribe to my YouTube podcast and also through Spotify, where you can also hear it. And all right, well, let's get started. Kris, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have this conversation. This is actually something that I've always been really into in terms of reconnected to my intuition. And I'm sure you'll share your journey of how you've reconnected and how you're helping others reconnect with their intuition. But let me just introduce Kris for a little bit. So Kris Cazares-Neri, she is an energy intuitive and coach to soul entrepreneurs and creatives. She is passionate about guiding women as they reclaim their power, as they activate their soul's purpose and mission, and also helps them heal, teaches them how to heal also themselves and find their purpose. So I think that's just really, really powerful work, Kris. And I am so excited to have this conversation with you.
Oh my gosh, Cynthia, thank you so much. It's just an honor to be here and to be talking about my favorite topics with you. So thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. I want to learn more about you. I know I met you through, I believe we are in the Amigahood Elevate
Yes,
program. So I just
that's
wanted to
right.
shout out that. And that is a program for just like Latinas, mujeres, emprendedoras who are, badasses, chingonas, who are really trying to elevate. We're elevating, we're not trying, we are elevating our business. We're elevating ourselves through comunidad. And I really love that we were able to connect through there. And this was definitely one of my purpose, to connect with community, to collaborate, to support. And that's also part of my mission as well. So Kris, but tell me a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit about your story when it comes to what called you to do this work.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Oh my gosh, my story. So I actually, since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to be a professional photographer. Kind of had my heart was in it. Basically, my intuition was like, you're going to be a photographer. And that's what I did for many years. Ever since high school, I have been dedicated to photography. I actually ran a very successful wedding photo and video studio here in San Diego. It was called Anza Photo and Film.
Mm.
And, I got to this place where I was shooting these luxurious multi-day Indian weddings, and I had all the things, like all the boxes checked. I have a husband who loves me. I have kids. I have this business that my heart was into, but something started to change. And I started to feel this voice inside, what once was a voice when I was working saying, you are exactly where you're meant to be. It started
Mm.
to shift. And as I was working, I would hear like little nudges of, this isn't what you want to be doing anymore.
Mm.
And I'll be honest, those voices just like totally scared me. Am I
Mm.
allowed to say shit on here?
Yeah, you're allowed to
Okay.
say anything you want.
So those voices just scared the shit out of me, to be
Yeah.
completely honest, because I was like, no, like this is the dream. I'm doing it. This is what I'm supposed to do forever. But the voice wouldn't leave me alone. And so it just kind of
Mm.
got to this point where I remember being in my car, my hands on the wheel driving. And when you zone out, like you're driving or you're in the shower and you hear your intuition or you hear
Mhm.
those clear thoughts more. And it was just nagging me. It got more persistent. You're supposed to be doing something else. And I could
Mhm.
feel the energy of the something else out there, but I had no idea what that was yet. And so I
Mm.
just started praying. I just started meditating and saying, okay, like I don't know what it is yet, but I am saying yes to the journey. And so the story is long and I'll do the Cliff Notes version, but essentially I really was kind of awakened through a series of spiritual experiences that opened my eyes to the fact that I am meant to be doing intuitive healing work in my life. And it changed everything for me, as well as motherhood. When I became a mom, a lot of my gifts as an intuitive started coming back online. And I say back because it's something I always had as a kid, but I really shut it down out of fear and out of a
Mm.
misunderstanding of what intuition is. And I think a lot of us women do that, especially Latinas. Like we're taught to fear things sometimes and we only hear
Yeah.
like scary stories, and it really disconnects us from our truth. And so I really started a journey of activating and becoming intimate with that part of myself. And it changed everything. And now here I am. I am a coach and a healer to spiritual entrepreneurs and creatives or women who are on the healing journey. And yeah, it's my intuition that brought me from a whole other career into this place.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And when you shared a little bit of like this fear, right? When you are in silence, when you are just more in tuned, with nature, with yourself, with your body, and oftentimes I think that intuition, there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about it. I think there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of taboo because of the history, right? That a lot of us, women and men, and just like our humanity, we've disconnected through conditioning of,
Yes.
religion, society, culture, family systems, trauma, historical, intergenerational trauma. And that's what actually disconnects us as well from our intuition, right?
Yeah.
From that inner voice, from that inner knowing, that inner calling. People call it very different things, right? But I wanted to just name that because that is something that I hear a lot. Like it's scary to listen to that inner voice
Yes.
sometimes because we're taught like that's, eso es malo, eso es el demonio y todas estas cositas que aprendemos y tenemos que desaprender. We have to do a lot of that unlearning.
Mm-hmm.
But I do just want to acknowledge and validate that there's a lot of fear and taboos around connecting with our intuition. And I guess I'm curious for you in your experience, if you grew up learning about intuition, like through your mother, through your abuelas, through your family or fathers, right? Because I do want to say that men are also very much disconnected with their
Yeah.
intuition. And I see that all of the time in the line of work that I do as well. But I'm wondering for you, where did you learn? Did you learn that growing up in any way?
Yeah. Well, first off, I love everything that you just said, and I completely agree with you. That's been my experience as well. Like, there's a lot of taboo, a lot of fear, even growing up watching movies, anything that had to do with the in between, with the intuition, it was like marked as scary or something that we should be afraid of. And you're so right. Like, most of us have ancestors, if not all of us have ancestors who working with their intuition and their soul voice was a part of everyday life. And eventually we experienced a lot of trauma because we were marked as being evil, marked as being bad, right? Like the bruja, like
Brujas, brujas.
exactly in a negative connotation instead of
Yeah.
like healing connotation. And that trauma lives within. So we have this response of like, oh, I have to hide or I'm not allowed to talk about this out of survival. But I
Mm,
believe that the tides are changing and it is becoming safer for us to reclaim that power and reclaim that part of our nature, because we are not only these physical bodies, we are that place where spirit and matter meet. And I think both of those things make us whole or make us who we truly are. And
mhm,
so, yeah, I love everything you said, and I'm totally with you on that. I was definitely not taught any of this stuff.
mm,
As a child, I was very intuitive and I had a lot of experiences, and I didn't have anybody to talk to about them. I think they really
mm,
confused me because nobody mentioned them. And I really started to shut them down, or I would tell myself things like I'm crazy. So that was actually a
mm.
huge part
Yeah.
of my healing journey, is accepting that no, I am a sane, normal woman who's just experienced something very natural. And I am,
Mhm,
so I'm the eldest of six
mm,
kids in a
mhm,
Mexican family. And yeah, along with many other things, I had to go on that journey by myself. But it's kind of funny. I was just talking to a friend about this. Even though my mom and my nana, like none of them ever talked about that type of stuff, it's funny because I will hear comments from them, like my mom seeing a spirit and like totally disregarding it, or my nana saying that she loves to stand by trees because she could feel the energy. And I'm like, I'm realizing that
mm.
these really are a part of who they are too, but they just never had the outlet. And it's because I have decided to embody more of that and bring it into my life and also my children's lives. It almost gives them permission to
Yeah.
express that repressed part of themselves too.
Wow, that's powerful. That's even giving me chills because I realize that as you're talking about this, um, I a lot of our ancestors, right, our nanas, our abuelas, our abuelos, our family and our lineage, and culturally and historically, we've been disconnected from our power, right, from our ability to it tune into the divine, tune into our spirituality, tune into understanding that there is a higher power. Depend whatever is it that you believe in, right, using your own language. There is a higher power, and understanding that we do also hold a lot of that magic, that power as well within ourselves. And when you mentioned that, it wasn't really taught, but it was also, there was not a lot language for it. There was no language for it. I'm hearing in your family, it was just like, okay, I understand energy, I understand that there's spirits or there's energies, right? So sometimes it's like, I realize a lot of our ancestors and perhaps our parents or grandparents or family in our lineage, they may not have had the language, but they know that it was there, right? It was accessible, but they didn't have the ability and the tools to reconnect back to that. So I'm loving that you're just saying that you're giving yourself permission to reclaim that back, and also for newer generations is also teaching them and allowing them to connect with their intuition, with their magia, with their abilities in their own way, right? And I think that's just really, really powerful and beautiful.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about it, is that we just don't have the language. And I remember when I first experienced healing energy from somebody, receiving healing energy, I was a little bit like, what is this healing energy stuff? It sounds kind of weird. I had
Mhm.
like honestly resistance around it. Absolutely. I remember experiencing it. And then as I was leaving, I could hear a voice inside that said, This is a language that you are fluent in, but you never knew that you knew. It
Mm.
was kind of like walking into a room where everyone's talking another language and you're like, I know what they're saying, but I've never learned that before. And that was exactly it. That the language for understanding energy, it runs in my family, it runs in my blood. It's that magic, but it had to be reclaimed, it had to be reactivated. And so sometimes we just have to give ourselves permission to say yes to that and to doing that to heal our lineage.
Exactly, exactly. And I guess I'm wondering for you, what is intuition, right? Because I think there's a lot of definitions out there, and I don't believe in there being a right or wrong way of defining it because everyone is going to have a very unique experience. Um, but I'm wondering for you, like, what does it mean? What does intuition mean? And what does it mean for you or for people to trust their intuition?
Yes, I love that question. So for me, the intuition is truly the voice of the soul. I believe that we all have a soul that if we want to think about it like an energy, sure, a consciousness, sure, like a light body, maybe, we're exactly like you said, we're all going to have a definition of what that soul is. But the intuition is the voice of that pure part of ourself that comes from unconditional love. And I think the reason that we are so disconnected from that is because we have given so much power to the voice of our mind. Our minds are beautiful things. As you know, and as you know in your work, our minds are so incredibly powerful, and they are pathways to help us become more in touch with our intuition. But there's also, if we give so much power to our minds and to our thoughts, it can, like almost like this dictator that it's like, if we believe
Mm-hmm.
every thought we have, if we believe every single thought that comes through our brain, we can really like get out of alignment and step
Mm.
out of being in alignment with what truly makes us happy. It truly brings us peace and what we truly want to express. Yeah. So the intuition is just the voice of our soul, and it's in contrast or perhaps could be in complement to the voice of our mind.
I love that. I love that. I do generally believe that intuition, it's like that soul calling, almost like that inner knowing. It's that
Yeah.
inner voice that already knows, that has known, that is ancient, that has, transpired and transmuted through, even past lives, through even like
Mm-hmm.
dimension, like multidimensional. And it's definitely an inner knowing, right? And I think
Yes.
it's just it's just really powerful to kind of to reconnect with it. And I can share a little bit of my experience. I would say I was just kind of thinking, well, how long ago have I kind of reconnected with my intuition? And I think that this is for me, it's something that I've connected it since I was little, right? I've always been very curious about the unknown or the things that were not talked about. And I've always expressed a lot of curiosity I've experienced throughout my life with different spiritual backgrounds, different spiritual practices, different tools, different ways of reconnecting back and reclaiming back to that inner knowing, that inner voice, that my intuition. But I think for me at the end of the day and not where I'm at now is, as you mentioned, that soul calling, right? That feeling like I already know, and it's not coming from a space of fear. It's not coming from a space of trauma. It's coming from a calm, serene, kind of like inner voice that tells me this is what is, right? And this is
Yes.
what's happening. And I think for me, I've just I've always been really connected to that. But as you mentioned, like there's a lot of fears that do come with that. It's like I remember, I think for me, just feeling like why for me, I do a lot of this work in my dreams. So I realize
Mm.
like in my dreams, this is where, and I think everyone has different tools in ways to reconnect with their intuition. But I know that dream journaling has been something that's been really helpful for me because I'm already doing a lot of that work and processing and grieving and understanding through dreams. But just also through
Beautiful.
through like my body sensations, right? And understanding energies. And I think, and like understanding people's energies. And for me,
Yeah.
I think that that's been a very much way of reconnecting back and reclaiming my energy and understanding that even though in our lineage, you know, like mujeres, women, through history, we've been told not to practice our medicine, not to expand it, right? I think that,
Yes.
as you mentioned, like the brujas, right? There's a lot of stigma. There was a lot of stigma, and a lot of women kind of had to just shut it down and
Repress it.
completely repress it, suppress it, and not listen to it, not tap into it. And I think that's just very sad, but I'm really happy that in us, we are doing this work and we are connecting and reconnecting back to our power and reclaiming that. And I think that's just very beautiful because I know there is still in navigating these systems, right, of oppression, religions, other things that really suppress and disconnect us. Like there are, you know, limiting beliefs, all of these things that our lineage has carried. That's still happening till this day. And that will
Yeah.
continue. That will continue. But it's figuring out how do we stay true to ourselves. And
Mm.
I think that that is a journey that is going to be very unique for everyone. But once you kind of get a grasp on it, once you start like reconnecting to that, is figuring out how can I just continue this journey, even if it's like baby steps, little steps. Can I just continue to stay connected with myself, with my power, with my magic, you know, and what I have to offer? Because I think that at the end of the day, this intuition and connecting back to our intuition, it's bigger than us, right?
Yeah.
It's not self-centered, ego-centered. It's like, how can I use this to continue with self-discovery, self-exploration, healing my lineage, knowing who I am, knowing where I come from, understanding myself, but also how do I use this for a bigger purpose, right? How
Mm.
can I use this to help others, to help
Exactly.
humanity? Because clearly we're fucked up. You know, like
We're all messed up.
we're all messed up. So how can I use this to a greater good for humanity, for a greater purpose that is not so much ego self-centered, but that is like healing and supporting communities, the world, humanity, right? So
Totally. I totally agree with you. I think that at first, you know, it is a huge sense of discomfort when you start to learn how to dive inside of yourself, because there is that voice of like, oh my gosh, am I egocentric? Am I thinking too much about myself? And I think it's okay, you know, to be there. But the important thing to remember is that if our even more recent ancestors had had the opportunities, the privilege to be able to dive within themselves, a lot of traumas could have been stopped, right? A lot of things
mm,
could have not been perpetuated and passed on. It's
mhm,
diving within that gives us that level of awareness where we can stop and say, oh, I see what's going on here. I see the cycles that I am perpetuating through my own actions, even though I thought I was so different from my ancestors. And here is how
mhm,
I can stop them intentionally with love. And so it's almost like you do have to dive in to get to this level of self-awareness. But then from there, just like you said, you realize it really is about service. It really is about
mm,
healing the whole, about being there for each other and how we can make this collective better. And I am with you. For me and the women that I work with as a coach and as a healer, we feel like we're being called to work to do something. We feel like we want to pour our powerful, passionate energy into our work through like working with others, into our art, into our creations, so that we can make this world a better place. I truly think that there are so many women that are being called to step up as leaders. It doesn't mean
mhm,
leaders of the world, okay? It doesn't mean to be leaders of, you know, Instagram influencers. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means to be in your own power, to
Mm-hmm.
inspire those who are looking for those breadcrumbs themselves to help themselves
Mm.
navigate their journey of self-awareness and their journey of healing and reclaiming their own magic.
I love that. And yes, you're right. It's really about reclaiming their own magic and like stepping up, even like as you're talking about leaders, right? Leaders of themselves, right? Reclaiming that as a sovereign person who has been oppressed through generations, right? And understanding that it's all for a higher purpose, it's all for a higher service, right? And if that includes healing ourselves, healing oneself, understanding oneself, but also part of that is giving back to the world. And it's like this collective consciousness, collective healing, collective despertar or awakening that I think it's happening a lot in and I'm all up for that.
I'm all for it too. You know what I
Yeah.
always think about Latinas too is that we're not that far away from our magic. Even though we do have
Mhm.
ancestors who have been repressed, we probably still had, the Nana standing by the tree so she could feel the energy, or,
Mhm.
belief in little, what we say, superstitions, or there's still a connection. We're not that far away from our magic. And I think that's why we are so passionate, and that's why we are so driven.
Exactly. And I often think like, because I do work with a lot of first gens,
Mm.
Latinas, Latines, like that's my main community that I support. But I think that a lot of people, well, I'm the first at this, I'm the first at that, first gen. And the reality is like, okay, well, when I have conversations with my parents, I realize I'm not the first in a lot of things. They were already breaking cycles. And just because right now we are in this kind of era where we have the language, we are have more information, we have more access, right? Social media, information online, like things are just more accessible and we have the tools. We have more of a language. But it doesn't really necessarily mean that our ancestors haven't been doing the work. They have. They've just been using different language, different approaches, different ways, very unique ways. And so as we, right? So understanding that there are people, there our ancestors have been doing the work, right?
Yeah, and we get to take the baton and take it to the
Exactly.
next level, as I pray our children do, right? Mm.
Exactly. So I guess I'm wondering, for you, what do you think are some of the challenges? I know that we had talked about some of the challenges right now, but what do you think are other challenges that do come up when for other women to connect to their intuition?
Yes. So, what I see most often, not only through my own journey, but with working with other powerful women, is a couple things. Sometimes I find that the emotions tend to block the big emotions we have that we are not releasing and that we haven't processed. Sometimes those act as like a wall. It
Mm,
A wall where we cannot hear our intuition under the weight of the emotions that we're carrying every day. I am incredibly empathic, and a lot of the women that I tend to work with are also empathic. When you're empathic, things feel like you feel things more intensely. So they feel heavier. When things are great, you can feel it. Like it's almost like a visceral, actual experience.
mm,
And I have noticed that a lot of the passionate women I work with haven't been taught how to take care of their energy bodies.
mm,
And so that is why I love incorporating energy work into the work that I do with people, so I can show them this part of themselves that maybe, I mean, I don't know about you, but nobody ever told me how to take care of my energy body. And so I was walking around like not knowing anything about energy hygiene, and then wondering why I felt like I was walking with, 1,000 bricks on my shoulders all the time. I felt like I was
mm,
getting out of bed every day walking through mud. And so I have seen that emotions and not cleansing our emotions or taking care of our energy bodies has been a really big one. Another thing that I have seen really blocking women is the sense of, who do I think I am? It's that
mm,
imposter syndrome. The
mhm,
mind wants to step in and wants to check us because it can feel that our heart is becoming more powerful, that our intuition is becoming stronger. And our brain always wants to keep us safe, right? Like, don't step into a new reality because we don't know that reality. You gotta get back. So I always find that in the moments of our biggest breakthroughs, that's when we have the biggest moments of doubt of like, who do I think I am? I'm not as smart as that person. I'm not as talented as that person. She seems to have it all figured out. And therefore we start losing trust in our own wisdom and in our own magic.
Yeah, and the conditioning, right? The comparison,
Mm-hmm.
the conditioning of quién creo que soy, who do I think I am,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's actually something that has come up with a lot of the conditioning, as you mentioned, right? Of having to
Yeah.
suppress and repress our truth, our voice, our power, our unique gifts, our intuition, right? So I think it's that. And also I'm wondering if you've seen that trauma does impact reconnecting back to our intuition, and how do you think it does?
Yes. So oftentimes I think that we may confuse our responses that come from protection as the voice of our intuition. And so, for example, maybe, okay, this is something that I have experienced personally that I have actively healed, but I have found that a lot of us carry sister wounds where we feel like we cannot trust other women, that, we say things like, oh, I just get along better with men than I do with women. And I carried a lot of that for a long time. I didn't so much think it was part of my story as it was my ancestors, but I started seeing it, maybe not in the way I act, but in the thoughts I would have. And so in the beginning of my journey, I started becoming aware that I would see women who were in their power and who honestly inspired me. And I would have thoughts about them like, oh, like, she's not a safe space, or her power is too much. Who does she think she is? Things like that. I felt like I was protecting myself, but really what it was is I had this deep ingrained wound in this limiting beliefs about other powerful women that if you would have asked me, I was not consciously aware of, but was existing in my day to day. And it wasn't until I reached that level of self awareness that I could really dig that out and start exploring that. And so I think we all carry varying degrees of this there's so many different types of limiting beliefs that our subconscious carries. That it's going to be different for each of us. But one thing we can do to analyze, is this really, am I making this judgment around maybe even spirituality, for example, from a place of fear? Or is this truly my intuition speaking to me? What I recommend doing is sitting in silence, right? So maybe you need to go for a walk first to kind of get your body in a relaxed state. But when you can take a moment to really sit with yourself and allow for a sense of stillness to overcome you, you can start to realize if the voices that you have that are telling you that you are in danger are coming from a place of fear, or if they're coming from that deep stillness within. And once you start getting good at reading these two things, it becomes easier and easier to see which energy is really controlling this thought.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And yes, I think this is something that I have personally experienced too, because it was coming from, negative experiences, trauma with friendships, and just like the stir wound
Yeah.
with other women. And I think this is something that I do see a lot. I do see a lot in the work that I do. And I think also in our society and culture, I think there's kind of this ingrained in conditioning for women to compete with each other, to compete for resources, to compete for, when the reality, it's like we all have access. We are all abundant in our own ways.
Yes.
But because of this conditioning, societal, cultural, patriarchal, like machista culture, and that we internalize, and then there's sense of competitiveness that does come up, and this fear of like this scarcity mindset, right? Of feeling like not enough, unworthy. It also comes from a lot of different wounds, like wounds, childhood wounds, or just intergenerational wounds of abandonment, of rejection, of humiliation,
Mm-hmm.
of betrayal, right? So I think understanding that the differences between, as you mentioned, is when I do sit in stillness, is it coming from a place of my conditioning, of my wounds, of my past traumas and experiences, versus is it coming from a deep inner knowing, an understanding that goes beyond consciousness, that goes beyond, like the our own conditioning and our own minds and fears, right? So I think also, like as you mentioning, tapping into our body awareness of what sensations are going to come up.
Mm-hmm.
Are we like completely dysregulated if we're in this space of judgment, scarcity, fear, worry, trauma response, or dysregulate? Is our body dysregulated? Is our body like feeling tensed up? Is our stomach, do we feel like a pit in our stomach? Do we feel maybe dissociated from our body or disconnected, right? Where we can't really connect to our heart center, versus do we feel more calm, more like we can breathe, we can take a deep breath, we can, touch our feet with, with the to the ground and feel like I'm grounded, I'm rooted, right? So understanding that there are differences, whether if it's like intuition, or whether it's a trauma response, or if it's coming from a scarcity fear based response.
Yes. I love that too. I have made decisions before when I was completely dysregulated and they were not the best, like when you're angry. And
Yeah.
that's why it's so important to get to know ourselves enough to understand what helps me get to that place. And so for me, being that empath I told you about, where I could feel things very physically, moving my
Mhm.
body really helps. Shaking, like doing shamanic shaking or some somatic work, or just going for a walk. When you kind of go for a walk and your body's kind of humming and you feel
Mhm.
that those good vibes, those are really good places to then afterwards sit in silence and begin to tap in with that voice. And I do have to say that, the truth is that not everybody is trustworthy, right? So maybe you're going to have a thought about somebody and you're going to sit in that stillness, and then your intuition is going to say no, like actually you're right, like this isn't a relationship to avoid, or maybe you need to move on from this. But the big difference is the intuition really doesn't judge. So even
Mhm.
though that might not be in alignment for you, it kind of comes with this detached piece where you go, okay, like I respect them and their journey, and that's okay that they are on that path. Who knows, it's not my place to judge. But from my own sovereign choice and wisdom, I choose to disconnect. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of peace there. So I do tend to find that the intuition sometimes, while it is loving, sometimes it's very neutral also,
Mhm.
but it's not
Yeah.
charged with feelings of anger and fear.
Yes, I think that you bring a big point, and I do want to um really just mention that like our intuition, it's also there to support us expand, grow, heal, transform, transmute. It's there to help us, to also protect us, right? And I think it's important that we tap into that, because there are always you're always going to encounter people that they show you one face and then they're a completely different person. And I think that's just the reality of navigating life, relationships. And you get to also live through these experiences and figure out, I have to practice and cultivate discernment. I have to practice and cultivate self-love, self-respect, integrity, and tuning into my intuition and figuring out, is this the kind of relationships that I want? Am I also seeing some signs that I realize, like, I don't like this? I can smell the bullshit from miles away. and or I just no se siente bien en mi cuerpo.
Yeah.
Simplemente, I don't want to be involved with this person or people with these characteristics, personal traits. And that's okay. That is also your
Mm-hmm.
intuition. That is you, like walking with integrity, self love, self respect, and knowing that not everyone's going to be for you and you're not going to be for everyone. No eres monedita de oro para gustarle, para caerle bien a todos, you know? And I think that that's also something that I have personally had to work through. You know, especially, and I see this a lot with people pleasers, people with perfectionist tendencies, people that want love, attention, want to be chosen, you know, like even like the pick me movement. And I don't know if you've heard of that, but like the pick me girls, the pick me boys, it's like learning how to tune into back to yourself and your needs and figuring out where is this coming from and reconnecting and shifting a little bit of that narrative as well.
Totally. I also love that the intuition knows that we are only human, right?
Yeah.
So even though I can detach from things with love and grace, my intuition also tells me, like, hey, you also need to let these emotions out. So whether
Mm-hmm.
that be frustration, whether that be anger, right? Just because we are intuitively led doesn't mean we actually don't experience the full spectrum of human emotions. But my intuition will tell me, like, hey, dude, you got to take a nap, like you got to chill, or don't respond to this just now. Why don't you let this out first?
Yeah.
So there's grace there. You get to be a human, and you also get to be this beautiful, loving soul at the same time. And the thing is, when you
Exactly.
honor that, those feelings go away so much faster.
Exactly. And I think reconnecting with our intuition is not about repressing or suppressing our emotions. It's actually
Yeah.
tuning into them, processing them, being curious about them, feeling them, honoring them, acknowledging them, validating them, and then also releasing them. Figuring out what do I do? What do I want to do with these messengers? What do I want to do? And how can I work with them rather than against them? Right? How can I work with myself in this moment, feeling having all of these rage, anger, all of these things, frustration, insecurity, fear, like, and then how do I allow myself to process these and what do I want to do with these? How do I also release them? So understanding that this is all part of the process. It's really about radical self-love, radical acceptance, and also like radical surrenderance, if you want to call it like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
So it's an ongoing kind of cycle. And I think that understanding it is important too as
And
well.
that's why I love healing work so much,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, I'm like a grower. I love setting goals. I love having passions, having dreams. And I have found that accepting healing, because when you are following your intuition, there's going to be so many roadblocks. There's
Mm-hmm.
going to be the conditioning of our minds. There's going to be everything that happens when you start to awaken. There's going to be other people, relationships, right, that we have to navigate as we try to embody these newer, more evolved versions of ourselves. And the healing journey accepts that. Like it accepts that we're going to go through things. We're going to learn how to transmute them. We're going to feel the feelings, and we're going to learn how to release them. And that is why I think that things like being a creative person and being an entrepreneur, a soulpreneur, so a soul-led entrepreneur, it is innately a healing journey. Like there's almost no
Mm.
escaping it, right?
For
There is no
sure.
escaping it.
And there's no need to, right? And I
There's no
think
need
that
to.
you have to go through the process. And yeah, when you do become an entrepreneur, and I think I'm sure you and I have had our unique experiences about navigating this, right? How it just also brings up a lot of our money wounds, a lot of our
Mm,
internal battles, right? That we need to unlock and create space and room, right, for growth, expansion, having a growth mindset and allowing ourselves to be learners, you know, rather than just being very fixed and rigid. We kind of have to go with the flow.
totally. Get comfortable evolving.
Exactly. So I guess I'm wondering, for you in your line of work and the healing work that you do with your clients, how do you help others reconnect back to their intuition, and how do you actually, what advice would you give people right now to, or women, other mujeres, to start reconnecting with their intuition?
Yes. So one of the biggest things, like I had mentioned with my clients, is getting the tools to be able to navigate our big emotions. Because chances are, if you are a passionate woman with big dreams and, desires on your heart, you have big emotions, and a lot of times we were not taught how to channel that energy into forward momentum. And so these emotions just get stuck and they start working against us instead of for us. And so helping my clients navigate that journey often leads them to one of their biggest breakthroughs. But underneath all of that, truly what is the most important thing is reconnecting them and allowing them to be able to experience and see their highest self. So their highest self is just like the highest version of them in this lifetime. And in my healing work that I do with people, I often very literally see their soul self. The soul self always has very empowering, beautiful, loving messages that are constantly reminding them of what they came here to do, who they truly are, how powerful they are, how loving they are. And oftentimes when we receive these messages, it feels so wonderful. It feels so beautiful. It actually feels nostalgic. It's like we're remembering, because we are remembering who we really are when we tap into our soul. But then, we settle back down and we go into life and we get uncomfortable with our own power. And so with my clients, I help them be able to expand their capacity to hold their own power so that they can start showing up like that in their everyday lives.
I love that. I love that. And this is just a glimpse of the work that you do, right? Because I'm sure
Yes.
other things do come up, and then you're
Oh,
having
yeah.
to also support them in their process, in their self-discovery, right? And understanding what's happening, how do they kind of channel this? How do they transmute? How do they integrate tools, right? To help them in their journey.
Exactly. I think that being an intuitive woman and being a healer, there's a level of responsibility, because it's not about making people dependent on healing work and things like mediumship. Like, it's very disempowering to always need these things. The important thing that is part of my mission is reminding each and every person that they really are their true greatest healer. And so I give them the tools so that they can start to claim their own power and realize that they have everything that they need to be able to navigate the bumpy road that is following your passions.
I love that. What message would you like to give, say, to mujeres out there listening, who are just wondering, curious, questioning, and they want to embark in this healing journey? They're maybe afraid of their experiences, and they're just trying to suppress or repress them, but something is calling them, right? And I guess I'm wondering, what message would you give them?
Trust yourself. That voice will never steer you wrong, and that you have the strength, the beauty, the loving support around you. Actually, I believe we all have loving support, and all of the loving support around us, whether that be our healed and benevolent ancestors, if you want to call it angels, if you want to call it guides, though that part of our support always wants us to follow that voice. And that when you start to say yes to that, when you start to believe that you have the courage, to know you have the courage to seek the support, the universe really does come in to help you. So you never are alone, and that you can do it.
Love that.
Cynthia, if you want, I can pull a card, but I don't know if that's your vibe. I just want to let you know.
Yeah, pull a card. I was about to
Cool.
tell you or ask you because I have my deck card here, Oracle. So, but
Cool.
yes, do it, do it.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to pull a card for everybody. So
Yes.
when I pull all Oracle cards, I am just creating space for the most loving messages to come through to support us in the highest good in the eyes of the benevolent, loving divine. And so today, here we go. Okay. I'm pulling number 4. This is a good one. Okay, so the card that we pulled today is be present. The way that I do oracle readings is I will start reading from the book, but generally kind of, things will start flowing from there. Be present. You are alive within the great field of unified consciousness, and this great field of unified consciousness is alive within you. You are not separate from this field. It is you and you are it. At the truest and most authentic level, everything is perfect as it is now, just as everything is unfolding flawlessly and for your ultimate benefit. To the linear human mind, this presents a paradox. If it's already perfect, why should you make constructive action or draw upon your power to change your situation for the better? To the divine mind, with which you are inseparable, both can be true. All can be perfect, and you can choose to create positive change. What's really coming through for me right now as I'm reading this to you guys is just this loving reminder to those of you listening that it is in the present moment that you're always going to feel the most connected to your highest self. So, what is it that you need to bring yourself back to the present moment? Is it somatic work? Is it moving your physical body? Is it breath work? Is it exercise? Is it prayer? Is it meditation? Explore your tools and know that those tools are really all it's really trying to do is help you get to that present moment. Because when you are there, that's when you're going to hear the intuition. That's when you're going to know what the next step for you is to help you navigate. That's when we stop and separate from the voices of the mind that tell you that you can't do it, you have too many responsibilities, this isn't a good time in your life. All the things that are trying to stop you, when you can settle into the present moment, you're going to feel the hope that will guide you.
I
Thank
love
you.
that. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. I love that message because you already have it in you. That's what it also said it, right? Like it's
Yeah.
already within you. It's just regardless if there's chaos around in the world, if you're going through a lot, if you're going through a challenging situation, um, if you're busy and you're like putting it off, understanding that you just have to sit in silence and in the presence of yourself and know that those answers are already within you.
Yes, beautiful.
I love that. Kris, what projects are you working on right now? What offerings do you have? How can people find you? How can people
Yes,
work with
so
you?
yeah, so I am on Instagram at Kris Cazare-Neri, and so I'm sure you'll have the links and all that.
Yes.
But that's where I share the most. That's where I'm the most active. What I'm really excited about right now, what I've been getting into my creative flow with, is working on my program Flourish. So Flourish is a beautiful 8-week devotion with your highest self.
Mm.
So this is for the passionate visionaries, for the entrepreneurs, for the women who know that they are here to help heal and lead the future. We are going to get really close with our highest selves, and you're going to get familiar with what she feels like, what she looks like, who she is. And we're going to start bridging the gap between who you are now and who she is. And we're going to do this together in a healing container. I love this program because every week we're going to meet, and I'm not only a coach, but I am an energy healer. So I'm going to lead us through exercises and meditations and healing sessions that are going to help support this transformation throughout the way so that we can really truly just embody our highest timeline in this life and stop feeling like it's so far away and start remembering that we have the tools to tap into our own magic right now. And so we
I
begin on May 28th, and I'm so excited.
Woo, that's awesome. I'm so excited for this and I support you in your offerings and I will
Thank
definitely be
you.
sharing all of this information when this episode releases. And yes, please reach out to Kris, follow her on her Instagram, connect with her, ask her questions. And yeah, thank you so much, Kris, for this really beautiful conversation. I felt like I felt really connected with all of the messages that you shared and that we collectively shared. And thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you. I also do want to share that your specific listeners, there's a code below that they can receive
Yes.
$44 off of this experience. So yay. And I just want to thank you. Like literally, this has been such a heartwarming conversation, such an expansive conversation. Thank you for being you. Thank you for allowing me to be in this space and sharing this with you.
Awesome. All right, Kris. Well, lovely seeing you. I'm sure we will collaborate hopefully in the future. Oh, and then
Yes.
you do have a podcast, right? You also do have a
I
podcast.
do have a podcast. It's called
Yes.
Kris Caz the Podcast, and it's anywhere you find your podcast. It's also on YouTube.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, Kris. Thank you, everyone who is listening, tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, leave a comment and share and tag us when you're listening to this episode. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you. Bye.